Are you willing to invest in yourself to take yourself to the next level? That takes work, that takes effort. When somebody's trying to make decisions on being a leader, what are your core values? What do you stand for? If I know what you stand for as a leader, then an organization, employees are 55 or 51 times more effective and engaged when I know what the company stands for. And credibility, there's a play on it. I've written it in my book, Why Aren't You More Like Me? Is that, credibility is based on behaviors I do and what I don't do. You need to bring people around you that compliment you. And also sometimes the people that irritate you the most, which could be a significant other, quite frankly, is the person you need the most because they're opposite of you.
Happy birthday to you. What is up, guys? Welcome back to the No Have Cakes podcast. My name is Jim Sibelico, and it is an honor to have you here with me today. Today's conversation, we're going to talk about a lot of things around leadership. We're going to talk about self-leadership. We're going to talk about navigating our current political climate. We're going to talk about how to be your best self. And if you see me sweating right now, it's not because it's hot, but it is. But it's literally a fire hose of information that we just went through. And I'm going to share with you now with our special guest, Dr. Keis. So let's jump into that.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing very well. How are you?
Excellent, thank you.
Good. I appreciate you being here. It means a lot.
Well, thanks for putting out the invitation. It's always good to meet new hosts. I had my own show for several years, and I just, after 2021, decided to take a break. You know how much work these things are, right?
It is a lot of work. It's a big commitment, and I think it can very easily become a burden, where it's something you decide, hey, is this worth the investment of time and energy and everything that goes into it for the payoff? Especially for something like this, there's not an immediate ROI. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm not sending people to a sales funnel and signing people up into a thing. The ROI is people feeling successful and happy, and it's kind of hard to track.
I get it. I understand that. There is some intentionality around. I have many friends who do podcasts, and yeah, you have to be very specific on how you build that out. But welcome, here to serve. Love being a guest. I think I've been on 100 plus shows, easy, maybe more, and did 300 of my own. So we got to be getting close to 500 by now. So whatever way we can serve you today, Jim, that's great. I think I sent to you that we do have a gift for guests. So we do have a funnel that we have when we give to people. So we give them a free gift, which is my ebook of my purpose. It's an ebook of my purpose book. And it's, I think I sent you the URL. It's kenkeys.com/cakes. I'm not sure how I got that URL, but, and then we track that to you as the partner.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll definitely include that in the show notes. And I appreciate that. I think, like, looking through your information, it was amazing to me how much experience you have in this arena. And I feel like we can go a couple different directions, right? I don't like these conversations to be scripted, right? So I don't ask too many questions ahead of time. I like it to be as authentic and raw and original as possible.
My style. My style.
Good. I love that. So when I was first reading through that, my immediate questions were like, man, we can talk about leadership. We can talk about so many things. And I'm sure you have sort of a ton of expertise to delve into. So I want to start by saying, what is it about content that is divisive or topics that might be people shy away from? Is that a thing for you where you enjoy having a conversation that maybe you can go into open-minded and learn a thing or two?
Well, I think part of what happens with people is, and where are you located, Jim, exactly?
I'm in New York.
Yeah. Okay. So you had an interesting night last night, right? So you have a country that is divided. So is Canada. That's where I'm based out of. I believe a lot of these things have happened as people have placated, meaning they've not spoken up. It's the sin of omission. They not really have shared where they're at, and they're sort of avoiding it. And for a person, I'm a person of faith. So I think the church has placated its role that it's supposed to do, and it's trying to appease to everybody and have everybody like them instead of speaking the truth. And so as a result of that, here's what we have, right? So lots of times, and it's not about being mean spirited or anything like that. It's just, okay, what are your convictions? Why do most people hate politicians? Because they say one thing and do something else. So they don't actually stand in integrity. So do you stand in integrity? Do you speak up? And by saying nothing, you are actually accepting what other people are doing. So that's what I mean by, speaking um, truth, speaking for what you stand for, standing by your values versus compromising, on which lots of people will do. So it's unfortunate at this time, but that's kind of what I mean by that. And especially from a leadership point of view, I might not agree with you, but at least I know what you stand for. So we can go wherever we need to. You can see the book behind my one head there is my number one book. It's called Why Aren't You More Like Me, which is our book on personality and how that influences people and how people are struggling to sort of identify who they are and what's important to them. So these are all mesh in. You're right. It's 35 years of work that's kind of merged into it. So we'll just go wherever we need to. I'm organic. That's the style I have. And then how long do you typically like to go?
We'll usually typically run about a 45 minute to an hour conversation. I think just to really jump off what you just said, I think a lot of people look at the political candidate, and let's keep going down that road, because I think that's a very timely conversation to have. When they view a political candidate who will say one thing and then do another, which I think is probably 99% of them, because a lot of them fall into the trap of they're not necessarily doing what's best in the interest of the people that they're serving. They may start out that way, but at some point it becomes, hey, how do I continue to climb? And they're looking out for what's in their own best interest. I think it's a very difficult position, because while you want to serve the people and you need to continue to climb to serve the people more, if you don't ultimately do what's going to help you climb, you can't serve, right? So it becomes really sticky when these people will say one thing to continue to elevate their career, but then ultimately do whatever is in their personal best interest to continue that journey. And I think one of the things that we fall into the trap of is accountability versus going for blood. Like I think when we see that, a lot of people want accountability, but what they actually want is they want their pound of flesh. They want to get some vengeance back for this person and push that person down rather than build the country up or build the team up. Because I think there's a lot of parallels between leadership at that level.
You're right. And then that's pretty well standard here in Canada, too. We just had an election in our province or state. It was all about attack ads because there was a new person who was running, more conservative values. And of course, they were just trying to be fear mongers versus what they were standing for. And I think that's what you saw in your country, too, is there wasn't too much on building one side. They were just, let's attack this person. And that's been going on for 8 years or even more so. So that being said, let's jump into it. I have a hard stop on the top of the hour, so I've got an hour for you. And then I have another area to go to. Wherever we need to go to serve your audience, if you were to say this reflects who I think my listeners are, who would that be, Jim?
To me, the listenership here is someone who's looking to enjoy success, to really find the freedom of a successful life, not in terms of, hey, I can be the best leader so I could become a CEO and make more money, but how do I build leadership in all areas of my life where I can have that freedom to feel authentic, right? That freedom that comes with not worrying about what people are going to view you as, or, do I have to say the right thing?
I just wrote the word authentic on that sheet.
And I mean, that's what these conversations are about, is helping people kind of unlock that, right? And figure out how to lead from authenticity, not from fear or not around other things that are really going to just build up the ego and pride. So then, to keep going down that path where you talked about the attack ads, right? Because very much the same thing here. The conversation around who you're going to choose to be a leader is, look at this other person and all the bad things that they're doing. It's not, hey, look at me and what I'm doing, right? The conversation has this negative undertone. But the question I would have for you is, where does that change begin? Right? Does the change begin with a political candidate or a leader saying, hey, I'm not going to do those kinds of ads? Because unfortunately, if the other side does, it sort of puts them at a disadvantage. Or do they stand on those core values and say, hey, as a leader, I'm going to take a stand to say, I'm not going into the negative. I'm doing the positive side. This is who I am. Don't vote for me because I'm not this person. Vote for me because this is what I stand for. Right? So where does a leader kind of make that decision on how to stand on their core values?
Well, you make these decisions in advance. In other words, part of the challenge is, when somebody's trying to make decisions on being a leader, what are your core values? What do you stand for? If you don't know what those values are, then you can't make values-based decisions. If integrity is one of your values, then that you lead with that. Now, the flip side is it doesn't mean that you don't point out the challenges that the other candidate has or doesn't have. That's not, it's not the sin of omission. But if it's only attack, then you really left a void of, what do I stand for? Who am I? How am I? So I might actually point out, okay, Jim is like this, but this is what we do. So you transition from pointing out what the other candidate is standing for or what are they doing. And then from a leadership point of view, and this is leadership both personally, professionally, or organizationally, is that if I'm not standing in integrity, and as you said, there was a study done around authenticity, and authenticity has the highest sort of positive vibrations. If you call it, I mean, you can walk in a room, and if there is negativity going on, you can feel the tension. Well, the opposite is true for authenticity. Is that, am I being real? You could have a friend or a partner, and you say, "Oh, come on, Ken, that doesn't sound right." You actually sort of have this intuitive energy or feeling of, yeah, Ken wasn't forthcoming with all the truth and all the different items there. And so this is where authenticity comes. What do you really stand for? Are you compromising that? And it just seems that politicians have moved into this space where I'm just going to attack. And a lot of times it's about power. In Canada, we have a leader who is narcissistic and a pathological liar. And unfortunately, there's nothing that's true. And sort of that's just the genre that person comes from. And it's this manipulation of other individuals versus being real. Now, if I want to lead an organization, there's all kinds of studies that, and I forget who the source is, but if I know what you stand for as a leader, then an organization employees are 55 or 51 times more. It was Forbes, 51 times more effective and engaged when I know what the company stands for. And so if a company's starting to compromise their values, or this is what the value of the week or the plan of the week or the plan of the day, where's the consistency? Now, I might disagree with you, but I need to know where you stand. And so through that consistency, can I count on that? Same thing as parenting. One week this is okay, next week it's not. That's what is it that we have here? So consistency really breeds confidence in individuals and the ability around competence. Because if I'm constantly changing my mind, then I actually don't have the competence to be able to lead you. Credibility comes from behavior I do and what I don't do. And credibility, there's a play on it. I've written it in my book, Why Aren't You More Like Me? Is that, credibility is based on behaviors I do and what I don't do. So, Jim, when I first got married, we were both 30s, in our 30s. So we kind of had an independent life. We had bought a townhouse, and our townhouse had a kitchen table that overlooked the covered parking area, which my wife had that parking spot. Mine was on the uncovered, right? So I was a good guy that way. So she comes home from teaching at the college around 9 o'clock at night. I'm sitting at the table. I'm reading something. This is 30 years ago, so I don't remember all the details. And she gets out of the car, her arms full of books, and she comes through the front door, and she's mad with me. And so why is she mad with me? Well, I didn't get up and open the door. Now, I wasn't thinking about what I was going to do or not do. It wasn't intentional on my part, but it was the sin of omission. And so she helped to understand, I helped her to understand that I wasn't thinking and that she was giving me too much credit, that I should have seen it. On the other hand, I was developing myself to say, I need to, as a leader, pay attention to those opportunities. By not doing that, I'm saying something to her. I'm saying, so, okay, I'm not going to pay attention to your needs. I'm just going to be self-absorbed in this paper I'm reading at the kitchen table. So when we think about leaders, a lot of times toxicity happens in organizations Now, many of you are familiar with Jim Collins, who wrote the book Good to Great, which is a New York Times bestseller. But he also wrote a book about what causes organizations to fail. And what he said, when you had Good to Great, when you had amazing organizations, it was the right people on the right bus doing the right things at the right times. So as an organization, as a company, we've been around for 35 years. And our goal is we have created psychological tools and assessments and processes to help people to get in the right seat in the right bus and do the right thing. So knowing self-awareness is our baseline for what we're doing. What Jim saw is that the most successful organizations have the right people, and it's a whole team that causes them to be successful, and it's a culture of success. On the other hand, when he wrote the book, What Causes Companies to Fail, he said, I had no idea that one single toxic leader could totally destroy $1 billion company. And so that's really what you have in countries where you have leaders who are toxic, and they single-handedly, because they have the power and the authority, can destroy a culture, destroy a country, destroy a company, destroy a family. And so toxicity is not to be overlooked. Now, as a leader, if I have a toxic individual on a team, the sin of omission is not dealing with it. We see that a lot of times where I avoid conflict. I avoid the difficult decisions. I avoid, Jim, that wasn't not really appreciated. So as a result of that is that you now are propagating this toxic behavior, and the sin of omission applies, meaning you're now saying your new policy is we don't have a policy. Your new policy is that toxicity is permitted. And it was in this one study, if I have one person in a team that's toxic, they can destroy the productivity of everybody else around them by over 50%. One single person. So the tolerance of toxicity it just has to go. Where if you have a toxic person, or, I hate the word Karen, which is kind of the one here, but if you have somebody that's like that, I'm sorry, it doesn't work. Now, when Scott Peck wrote the book, The Road Less Traveled, 30 years ago, he said one of the most difficult psychological conditions to treat is a thing called character disorder. Well, character disorder is where they blame everybody else. So we have a society, a certain portion of it, where it's everybody else's fault. It's all external. And he said it's the most difficult to treat because there's no personal responsibility for the condition that I'm in. So leaders take responsibility, or individuals who are even from a self-leadership point of view, I take responsibility for the condition I'm in. I'm the one who chose to be here. I'm the one who chose to respond that way. Now, I'm not saying that what a person says, what they do is appropriate, is right, is correct, is permissible. But my response is always my choice. So when Dr. David Burns wrote the book, Feeling Good, and this is our work around our personality, and this is the most difficult things for human beings to do, me, myself included. I've been married for 32 years. I probably had an incident last week, Jim, is what we call suspending. Meaning when somebody says something, nobody offends you, nobody irritates you, nobody upsets you unless you let them. So from a self-leadership point of view, is that managing self and managing a response versus a reaction. So there's a certain part of the population who's reacting. Well, you're not really in charge. You've given control to all the external forces around you. It's disabling you and enabling the other person who is kind of getting you under your skin. We've all had road rage at some point or another. You never knew this person before. They cut you off. They might have cut you off intentionally. You might not have. We don't know. But you've let whatever they've done upset you, and you're doing something stupid in your car, right? I've done it too, years ago, but not recently. So again, when we think about that, it's the hardest thing as a human being to manage ourselves and to control ourselves in what we call suspend our frame of reference in deference of this. Now, one of the things we teach from a character point of view, so in my book, The Quest for Purpose, which we will give away an e-copy to the listeners today, and we'll give you the URL here in a minute, is I talk about character traits. So one of the character traits that talk about people that are purposeful and living is forgiveness. Well, if I don't forgive somebody, it's not that I'm forgiving them for them. I'm forgiving them for me. All the research is clear. Those people that have been through divorces who continue to have bitterness, they shorten their life from 5 to 7 years because this bitterness, this unforgiveness erodes my whole personhood. So when we think about leadership, so we have an entire model on leadership, Jim. And so I guess this is where we're going down now. And we start the whole leadership model with principles. And principles is, what do I believe about leadership? What is the responsibility about leadership? Do I believe that people matter? Do I believe that I need to honor them? Do I believe that leadership is a matter of the heart, which is what Jim Kouzes spoke about in the Leadership Challenge, who has been kind enough to endorse one of our books? Do I believe that at any given moment, as a leader, I can influence this situation either negatively, neutral, or positive? I have that as in terms of how I want to do it. So we have this belief system. Then I have my own character traits, which we talk about in the Purpose book. And when I think about character traits, I could have my success laid out, I could have my goals, but if I don't have, we're talking about integrity. If I don't have integrity, then can I trust you? And so one of my mentors, Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, who was the #1 executive coach in the world, is now retired, wrote the book's New York Times bestseller book, Triggers. He said, if I'm working with a CEO of a Fortune 500 company and they lack integrity, in other words, they say they're going to do this by Wednesday or it's going to be done by Tuesday or whatever, they said, and they don't do it, then I said, I can't work with you. Your word doesn't matter. And so the integrity is, if you don't believe it, if you can't say, then why would you say it? I remember had the contract to do all the training with Chrysler for 10 years. And this was all the soft skills. And I remember being in a dealership working with an individual, and they said, my #1 value is honesty. And I said, okay. And then I watched him not necessarily be dishonest, but not be forthcoming with sharing details of a used car with a client. And I called him on it afterwards. And what I discovered was, it wasn't that he wasn't wanting to be honest. His #1 value was job security. He knew that if he was forthcoming with the details, the used car manager was going to be maybe firing him. So I said, hey, listen, you're compromising this value of honesty for this other one of, I want job security. I'm choosing one value over another. We all have values that we're choosing one value over another at some point or a time, but we need to know what those are. And when we think about these character traits, integrity, forgiveness, am I thankful? All of these fit into my behaviors, my choices. Now, the next step, and I'm moving on here, and I guess after 4 million words of content, is that I still enjoy doing this. Can you believe it? 35 years later. And that's what I'd want for everybody that's listening or watching, is that every single person has a purpose. Every single person has a contribution to make in leadership in whatever format that it is. If it's your family, if it's your siblings, it's your friends, if it's in a Fortune 50 company, I don't care who it is, you have a contribution to make.
Every person, no matter if they are a leader of a Fortune 50 company or they are mom and dad or whoever they are, run the spectrum. They have a set of core values that they have to identify and live by authentically. And when they do, if they can take responsibility for their choices, they can find success. I think just to boil it down that simply, people who do not identify their core values, authentically live by them, and then find a reason to blame somebody else for the results they have or do not have, are going to continually find frustration and disappointment, aggravation, depression, anxiety, all those things from not living in the authenticity of who they are and taking responsibility for their actions. Is that accurate?
100%, 100%. When we think about the Gallup study, 80 to 90% of the population are disengaged at work. How can you possibly have work cultures that are successful? You can feel successful if the nature of the work doesn't match who you are. Now, there are multiple things that contribute to this. It's the right work. Is your personal style or personality people a fit for the job? Are your core, what we call your core behavioral values, which is our work. We have an assessment in both personality and values that people could take to get clear about that. Say, is that so? Example is one of my values is challenge. So if I can't be in a role or responsibility that is boring, that is routine, I need to have something that's challenging me. I also have a value of independence. That's why I've had my own company or been in a roles or responsibilities for the last 40 years where I can actually make my own decisions about my space. I don't want to be controlled by other people. Now, it's not right. It's not wrong. It just is. There are other people where their number one value is tranquility. I'll give you an example, Jim. I was working with an organization, they had a 400% turnover. And this was a credit collection department of an organization. And I found out that the manager was hiring people who had tranquility as one of their values. And I said, why are you doing that? I said, well, our reputation is horrid in the marketplace. So I thought I would hire nice people. Well, if you're on a call for credit collection, what is that every call about? Some kind of conflict, right? The number one need of people with tranquility is harmony. Well, that's the last thing. That's why it's 400% turnover. So he was trying to go, he was well meaning. He was trying to, improve the reputation. But the nature of the person and the persons and the nature of the position was in conflict. And so that values discrepancy, which you just alluded to, was eroding their soul. And that's why they had a 400% turnover. So in the 90 days, we moved it to 40%. So a 360% improvement by hiring the right people that fit the need of that position, and they were more aligned. So we're not coming in judgment on your values of being right or wrong. You just need to know what those are. And can I live by it? Now, here's the challenge, Jim. The majority of people don't know. They just don't. They think they do. And that's why, okay, well, this is why I value today. Then it's tomorrow. Then there's people that are influencing them. There's all kinds of social pressures. I remember doing a workshop many years ago. And when we have people complete the assessment and we're going through what do you really value, we get to the very back and said, here are your top 7 values that you said through the assessment are important to you. And then I get you to rank them. Are they being met or not? So plus or minus or whatever. And this one individual, probably 22, 23 in the back of the room, every single one of them was a minus. And he was really in consternation. He was just kind of troubled. And I said, why is that? Why do you think they're all minuses? My whole life, I've lived what my parents want, not what I want. So a lot of us have these pressures, social pressures, community pressures, friend pressures to be somebody that we're not. Remember the old saying, Jim? Kids are to be seen, not heard. Where did that come from? And I'm a person who speaks. I remember my dad said, okay, you talk too much. I'm a verbal individual, but I also can be quiet too. Well, what does that say to the kids where their verbal nature, which we teach, is their strength? Kids are to be seen, not heard. What are you talking about? So all of a sudden there's a discrepancy of not honoring the uniqueness that you are. And so that's why we believe people need to take the personality assessment as well, so that I get clear. Now, I would remember being in California having dinner with Dr. Dick Foles, who's recently passed away, but he wrote the book, What Color's Your Parachute? And then his friend was there. And between the two of them, they had 80 years in career development. And I said, why do we have so many people disillusioned, depressed, down, not really engaging their whole life? And in unison, the two of them says, because people have not been willing to do the work. So you have this podcast, Jim, to really help to encourage people, to help them to lean in. But you need to do the work. You need to invest in yourself. Like our assessments cost money. So let's say the values assessment is $40. Well, I'm $40. I'm not going to spend that. But they're going to go to a movie, have a pizza and a beer this weekend. So, and that's going to cost them way over $40. So are you willing to invest in yourself to take yourself to the next level? That takes work. That takes effort. When I was doing my purpose work in 1989, I got into this profession of speaking. And I knew I was supposed to speak, but I didn't know about to who or what. And I was fortunate enough to be introduced to a gentleman called Mike McManus out of Seattle, Washington. I live about 2.5 hours north of him. This is, I know I look very young, Jim, but I'm dating myself. This is before email, okay? So, or a Zoom or whatever kind of program that you're using to Riverside to record. So I drove down there to meet with him for 6 months. I did the work. I hand wrote a journal of 40, 50, 60 pages of what do I really want in life? And so that's what I redid in the book, The Quest for Purpose, is our life is leaving us clues, but are we paying attention to them? Are we so busy being busy or distracted or scrolling or being sucked into reels that we haven't just stopped, take the breath, said, okay, Ken, what do you really like? What are the things that excite you, that are positive, that are energizing? So I did that work. And then my work is to help others to live, lead, and work on purpose. And it's to do it holistically. So I have a diploma in nutrition and genetics. My PhD is in leadership. And when we say about, okay, how can all of these things, my self-worth, my values, my cultural nuance, my personality, my leadership skills, all of these contribute to my personhood. So if you and I are, equally competent leaders, but you didn't get any sleep this week because whatever you're staying up late, then your ability to deploy is going to be less than me. And so when we think about wellness, that's one of my things. I was misdiagnosed as depressed, manic depressed way back in the 80s. I found I was hypoglycemic. And if we think about the wellness levels in North America, one of the reasons that people are not being successful in leadership is they're not healthy. They have cognitively, they can't focus, they have brain fog, we don't have the energy. So with all the processed foods, and everybody said, well, what's that got to do with leadership? Well, that has leadership with your kids. How healthy are you? What's your energy like? Can I focus on things? Am I eating healthy? Am I eating naturally? And so all of these contribute to sort of this leadership side. Now, about 10 minutes ago, I said, what was the next step? So we have all these behaviors. I know the direction I'm going on. I have a mindset that is a winning mindset. But the next one, which really a lot of leaders, it's not their fault, but they've just never looked at it, and that's leadership skills. So there's competencies. You go to be a plumber, you go for training and you are mentored by individuals. If you want to be a firefighter, if you want to be police, if you want to be a teacher, if you want to be you want to be a pilot, you want to be trained. So you could be the most willing, excited individual on the planet, Jim. And if you get into the airplane and you're in the co-pilot seat and then everybody's in the back says, listen, it's my first day. I've never trained to be a pilot, but I am so excited. I'm so willing to learn. And today's my first day. I mean, everybody's getting off the airplane. So this happens in leadership where most people are promoted into some kind of role, a supervisor, leader, without any competency development. They don't know. So we have a 160-hour university course that we've converted into an assessment and now soon to be online course called Transforming Leadership or Transformational Leadership. These are the skills that we need to develop over our lifetime to get to the next level. And we've already talked about some of them.
Yeah, I strongly agree. And I think there's also another contingent of people who start a company or start a business because they have a great idea, find themselves in a leadership role by default, without having climbed a ladder, but created their own ladder where they put themselves at the top of, and they spend all their time critiquing their employees, their team, or whoever it is, but never looking back at themselves to say, hey, how can I grow as a leader? I agree 100%. I think it's a huge issue, especially when you zoom out a little bit and look at, are they leading themselves well in every area of their life? Are they leading themselves well in their spirituality, in their nutrition, right? You look at these things and often the answer is no. They dedicate so much time and energy into this one thing, right? And that's the whole emphasis of the show, where I spent so much time trying to be successful in terms of my career, but was lacking in literally every other category. And, I think you've touched on so many amazing points there, but a lot of it leads me back to self-leadership. Your ability to lead yourself well. And again, whether that's in your relationships, your emotional health, your spiritual health, like all these different individual areas, but taking that personal accountability to say, hey, it doesn't matter what's going on in the outside world. I'm not going to blame my lack of results or my lack of success or my lack of happiness on external factors, but I'm willing to take accountability for it and say, hey, I can do better. I can surround myself with other people. I can get mentors. I can get community. I can get examples around other people to admit, hey, I'm not where I want to be. How can I grow? Right. So do you think there's a large portion of this that has to do with people's lack of willingness to admit they're not totally happy in a certain area?
I think, again, authenticity can be internal for sure. And when we think about, A lot of times people say believe that admitting that I don't know or I'm not aware is some kind of sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength. And a lot of times, what got a person, so Marshall wrote the book Triggers, but Dr. Marshall Goldsmith also wrote the book, What Got You There Won't Get You Here. And what he was talking about is, okay, so now I'm the number one sales rep. Now I'm a sales manager. Guess what? It's a totally different skill set. And so your drive, your tenacity, your individuality, your independence, that's not what's needed if you're going to be the sales manager to build the team. I have to build other people. The other thing is the research is clear is that most bullies or people who are toxic have low self-worth. And so if I'm actually confident in myself and I say, Jim, you know what? I really kind of screwed up there. My interpersonal skills, my communication skills, I'm sorry. So the ability to say sorry. So narcissism is apparent in a lot of leadership because people manipulated their way to the top. Now all of a sudden it's the opposite. So being authentic, being real, but also being real about the situation. Now here's the other side. A lot of times people's ego gets in the way. And this is where vulnerability and feeling secure in yourself means I need to hire the best people who are way better than me around me. I mean, that's what Jim Collins talked about in his book, Good to Great. Is so, Jim, you're the amazing marketer person. Share with me what's going on. How do you plan on doing it? The other thing is, in one of my other mentors who wrote 60 books, said, as soon as a CEO makes a suggestion, it's now in order. So a CEO or a leader of a company, you need to shut up and then say, Jim, what do you think you want to do with this marketing plan? If I say, I think we should do some more social media posts, I think we got to do this funnel on this email. And I said, Jim, what do you think we should do? Well, I think we should do some more media posts. I think we should do this funnel. I'm going to agree to what the CEO said. Shut up. So the best leaders are bringing the most talent that they can afford around them, the best talent, and then letting them do their thing while they hold them accountable to those results. And the other thing is that we teach is, especially in small business owners, is we try to do everything. And it's just not advisable. You need to bring people around you that complement you. And also sometimes the people that irritate you the most, which could be a significant other, quite frankly, is the person you need the most because they're opposite of you. So when we think about personalities or personal style, which we have the personal style indicator, is the nature of that person, what you need, their analytical, critical side is what you need, but it irritates you because they're constantly asking more questions. They're constantly being critical about the choices. They're constantly asking for more data so that they can make a quality decision. But it's bugging you because you would just want to go. You just want to go as an entrepreneur or whatever. So we need to bring people around us who complement us or are needed in the business. And this goes back to the systems that most people don't use. Now, one of my colleagues, Dr. Mitch Davidi, we've co-authored a book called Deliberate Leadership. And he's probably one of the number one trainers of leadership in the law enforcement area in the US right now. So the FBI and sheriff's departments and police departments are using him. And I remember doing a workshop with him in Washington State. And it was interesting. One of the colleagues there, he had been in law enforcement nearly 20 years. He had been in a major city, one of the top 5 largest cities in the US. And he said, I was there for 14 years. I never got a single day, not a minute of training on leadership. And I ran a gang group or a team, a counter gang team. So here you have these situations in a very critical space. I mean, these people are packing firearms that have zero leadership training. And so, okay, budget minded, whatever. So sometimes people just have not leaned in to do it, Jim.
Yeah, you make a good point there. And I want to go back a little bit to what you said about bullies. Because I think right now we're at a situation where society as a whole, we jumped into the social media age. Okay, so we came from a spot where everyone was kind of living their life and it was a little bit more authentic from the sake of the people who know you physically know you. They're around you. They see the fruit of your life all the time. Then we jumped into this situation where now everyone's got a social media profile where you have to portray a certain life that is Instagrammable rather than sustainable, where you are creating this image about who you are to 5,000 people who really only know you through your profile picture. Right? Most of the people you interact with, you may have never met. But it begs me to ask the question about authenticity and self-leadership, because I look around at society as a whole and I see a lot of people who are not sure who they are because they've spent so much time portraying an image or a version of themselves that they don't even know who they are themselves. So when it comes down to it, we've got an entire society full of people who are now bullying each other, and it creates a sort of downward spiral where rather than be able to support and uplift each other and hold each other accountable to the best versions of themselves, we just attack. And it becomes this, again, this negative spiral. So the question for me is, how do we start to begin to climb out of that? The answer for me, I think, is self-leadership, where someone is willing to stand up and say, hey, this is who I am, take it or leave it. I don't care if you don't like me. That's who I am. And the more people who can do that, not in a mean or vicious way, but in a confident way, where they know who they are and they're not afraid of other people finding out, yes, they have weaknesses. Yes, they have spots to improve. And when we can start to stand up and do that, we can start to kind of swing the tide to a spot where we get away from that and we can start to see the positive in people, and we can stop these attack ad type of culture that we have just to kind of tie all this together.
Well, companies are not silly or stupid. And what's happened, Jim, is the research is all clear. Is social media and the reels and all those things are designed to create addiction. So first of all, people are getting these dopamine spikes and they're getting sucked into it. So the discipline to disengage, because social media for especially teenagers and teenager girls or women, it really is affecting their self-worth. They actually feel poor because it is drawing in this. So as a parent, first of all, don't give your kids these smartphones until later in life, 16, 17, 18, whatever. There's no justification for a 12-year-old having a social media an account. And then of course we have predators, all of those that fit into it. So you have to disengage. The other one is when I talked about character traits and also mindset, what we say about ourselves. So when Martin Sigelman wrote the book Learned Optimism, he proved that how we think about success and failure is predictable for our future success. It was a 25-year study. But one of those character traits is that, as you said there, I'm not worried about what other people think. But the other one is one of the character traits is what's the group or tribe where we'll raise you up? So I need to be, show me your 5 closest friends, and I will extrapolate that and I will predict who you're going to be a year from now, 2 years from now. Your closest friends, your influencers are driving who you're becoming. You're like them. So if your tribe is not developing you, helping you, and moving you towards who you want to become, then you need to change that tribe. I'm sorry, it's just the way that it is. The other one is input equals output. What's the music you're listening to? What are all the other YouTube videos you're watching? What are the podcasts you're listening to? Are you listening to Jim that's uplifting you, or somebody else who is like dumping on other individuals? You think about some of the shows like The View, which really don't have anything positive to say about anything. Well, forget that. Move to a space. There's all kinds of opportunities. Now, as you said, social media has both the positive and the negative. Move to the other side. Do social media fast. One of the hardest things. I mean, the other day I forgot my phone. You thought like you lost your left arm. I'm out in town with my phone at home. Try this. Try to leave your phone at home when you go out somewhere. It is like you are having an anxiety attack. So you need to be intentional and say, okay, what's my tribe? Who could I want to be like? Who could mentor me? Who's way in front of me that might be willing to do some coaching, some mentoring with me to take me to the next level? Who do I say no to? So success is equally saying no as saying yes. So you could have some obligations. You could have some friends say, Ken, come out and hang out. We're going to go to the club tonight. We're going to do all yada, yada, yada. So, no. That's not my direction. Who are the people that you want to include? So these are all these intentionalities, as you said, developing self. And then do I get to know myself? If I'm miserable at work, okay, don't quit. But what's causing that? Is it my attitude? Is it the job? We teach that if your personality is not a match for the position, you cannot sustain engagement. So I'm feeling guilty and upset because I hate my job. Well, maybe you're in the wrong type of position. And so, again, if you don't know what your personal style is, then it's pretty difficult to be in the right position. If I don't know what my core values are, what I use to filter. And our core values, as I mentioned earlier, were behavioral. So if it's challenge, if it's independence, do I have those as components of the opportunities that I'm engaging in life? And if I don't, then I know at my core, I'm not going to feel fulfilled. So that's the work that you're teaching other people to do. Learn about yourself and then move into these other areas. And you have to, first of all, not worry what other people say. That's part of what's happened is that most people they're getting into this tribal mentality and they get sucked into, and by the way, it's brainwashing, right? Where we have all these sort of mandates or processes that other people are teaching. So that's the way that you need to be. You need to let go of that and be an independent person.
Yeah, I strongly agree. I think it ultimately comes down to this conversation you have with yourself, where are you happy with where you're at, or are you willing to go through the work, the uncomfortable work, to make some changes, right? And I think it's really uncomfortable for a lot of people to have that conversation, because you might realize that, yeah, you aren't super 100% happy with where you are. And that means you got to change some stuff. And, I think the biggest thing I can give anybody would be the permission to go ahead and make that change. Like, it's going to be uncomfortable for a couple of days, but on the other side of that discomfort is freedom, right? It's that authenticity where you can show up as you are and you don't have to worry about it. And, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but, I feel like going through that process is somewhat painful. It's uncomfortable. It's isolating. But you find yourself now surrounded with other people who are like-minded, and sort of the comeback from that, the ski jump effect you get from that is 100 times greater than any discomfort you could possibly ever imagine.
Yeah, 100%. In some ways, it actually can be freeing. So I grew up on a dairy farm. I'm a long ways away from that now. So I'm the firstborn male, Eastern European descent, third generation. Do you think there was a little pressure for me to stay on the dairy farm? And I have a pretty direct personal style. And even for me to leave was just so difficult to do it. But at the same time, it was freeing. Now, yes, as you said, it was uncomfortable. My family said, listen, we did all of this for you. Well, when the book Millionaire Next Door was written, only 10% of businesses make it to the third generation. Why is that? Well, the purpose, the calling, the assignment that the son, daughter, aunt, uncle, cousin has is not the same as the founders. And so, even though I enjoyed dairy farming, I was good at it, I even had my own for a little bit, that was not my destiny. And here's, before I wrote the book, The Quest for Purpose, what really led me into this was I asked myself this question, and this is for all the listeners and viewers. If you're in the same identical spot, development, friends, career, 20 years from now as you are right now, is that okay? And if the answer is yes, then you're fine. You're good. You're good to go. If it's no, then what you said, Jim, is what are the adjustments? What are the choices? So I decided to move out of the agricultural field and move into sales training, because I was a sales consultant in the late 80s, and then expanded that into this whole leadership side. The other thing that happened is, and just to encourage people, I'm dyslexic as well. So I've written 4 million words of content. No way in my 20s could you've ever convinced me that I would be an author. Like, not a chance. But the invention of the computer, the laptop, that if you remember, their story was nobody's going to need their own computer, was sort of the prediction, right? And so now that we have all our devices, there's more power in an iPhone than most of the computers from 20 years ago. So that helped me with the invention of Word and the little red line to help me understand that what I was misspelling. All of a sudden now this whole thing opened up that what was verbal for me now could be written. And so a lot of times that's that discovery process that you go through. So we believe in your purpose discovery is that you uncover what's always been there. Now, I've been doing this now for over 3 decades. I did a workshop for a group, a young adults group here, not that long ago, and I enjoyed it more than I did the first time I did it. So when you are in the zone, when you're in the flow, when you are doing what you are called to do, it energizes you. It is, yet at the same time, I bring my best self. So I have my highest contribution. That is true for every single person listening here. And somebody said, well, I don't have one. Well, that's not true. If you don't have a purpose, if you don't know what it is, you don't know what your direction is, then your purpose is to find your purpose. And so that's what, my book, The Quest for Purpose is, which we're going to give people a free copy of the e-version of it. Can I mention the URL where they can get it, Jim?
Yeah, please.
So my last name is spelled a little uniquely, but my website is Keis, KenKeis.com/cakes. Now, I'm not sure how we got that, Jim. So if you go to that hidden URL, and you will then be able to get a free download of the Quest for Purpose. And I went through this myself way back in 1989, and it is really a combination of teaching, but also journaling and also assessments where you go through this self-discovery that you talked about. Now, before we get to the end of the show and wherever we want to end it, Jim, is I just want to mention from the leadership skills point of view, and I know it's an overwhelming amount of content, but this is, I'll call it a framework, and you can contact me or whatever level and later on to find out more. We'll respond as best as we can. But in our leadership model, you have the principles, then you have self-management, which is what we've been mostly talking about here today, where I need to manage self first. So in our leadership model, self-management is the first module, because how could I lead others? We make a statement. My ability to serve others is equal to or less than our own development. So if you're undeveloped, you can't lead other people. So if I don't know how to do plumbing, I can't teach you how to do plumbing. If I don't know how to lead, I can't teach you how to lead. I can't be a good leader. The next set of skills is interpersonal communications. So people talk about EI or EQ, emotional intelligence, emotional quotient, but we talk about interpersonal communication skills, basic communication skills, clarifying, asking questions, suspending, getting out of the way to totally hear that person, making sure that all those pieces come into place, including some skills around where can I actually confront people and hold them accountable for what they're saying. The next set of skills is coaching and accountability. So a lot of times leaders say, hey, Jim, do you know that we start at 8:30 here at the office? And Jim, you say, yes, I know we start at 8:30. I think that you've agreed to 8:30. No. You've acknowledged it's 8:30. You have not agreed to the behavior. So accountability is, Jim, do you agree to come in at 8:30, which is when we start? Yes or no? And a lot of times leaders think that knowledge or information is confirmation or agreement to certain behavior. It's not. So there's whole nother skills around if somebody is struggling. So I'll give you another example. A lot of times we teach a thing called readiness and willingness. If a person is failing in life, is it their abilities or is it their attitude? And so I remember I was the number one sales rep in this organization. And then all of a sudden my sales went to half. And what had happened is I was engaged to a lady from Australia. She phoned me on February 14th. What day is that, Jim? Valentine's Day, right? It says, oh, by the way, I found another guy here in Brisbane, Australia. This is many years ago. And then we were engaged to get married. I was ready to go. So I was just struggling. Now, did the sales manager have to send me to a sales training course? No, I was the number one sales rep that was cut. This was really around a willingness. This was an emotional condition that I was grieving of losing. And so it was really about helping me through that journey. It wasn't about my sales skills. So lots of times, is there evidence that a person could do what you've asked them to do as a leader? So I've asked you, Jim, I want you to lead this group of 6 people. Has Jim ever done it before? Do you even know that he has the skills or not. So as a leader, even evaluating other people to their own benefit or detriment is important. The next set of skills is a group. So I have 6 people. How do I manage all these multiple relationships? If there's 3 people in the group, I think there's 9 different relationships. So even though you think there's just 3 people, there's 3 relationships. No. Each of them have a relationship, each of them with each other, the group. I think it's the multiple of 9. So now all of a sudden I'm going to say, how do I build consensus? How do I get people to talk to one another? How do I facilitate this conflict between Jim and Ken that are happening there? And then finally, the last set, and as I mentioned, there's this part of our 160-hour university course, is can I, in any given moment, we call it versatility skills, be awake or aware that if something is failing, is it my issue? Is it your issue? Is it our issue? Or is it an organizational issue? I remember one organization said, hey, listen, the salespeople are not following up with phone calls. Well, I found out that the business owner had only a couple of phone lines, and there was not enough phone lines for the people to call out. And because it was kind of this joint line, he didn't have the resources in place to fulfill the accountability and obligation. So it was an organizational deficiency, not what the team wanted to do. So can I be awake and aware as a leader of what is contributing to our condition? Is it me, you, us, or even the organization, or a combination thereof? And so this is a lifetime of work. I mean, we're talking about, okay, Ken, you got a lot of stuff here. Well, being a leader isn't a weekend seminar, isn't a 45-minute podcast. It is decision to go onto a lifelong journey. One of the other character traits is that contributes to a person's well-being is a commitment to lifelong learning. We never stop. I'm always reading some kind of article every morning on health and wellness, every morning on leadership, just to see what my colleagues are doing, what else is going on. Now with podcasts, I mean, think about what podcasts have done. They're just taking over. I don't listen to any, traditional media per se. I just go and choose what I listen to, what I want to, when I want to. And so there's no excuse to not go through this journey of development now, because the options are pretty near endless. You couldn't listen to everything that's being posted, even just today, in the rest of your lifetime. There's just so much stuff. And that might be the only thing where it's overwhelming, that you have to choose a channel or a process that works for you.
Yeah. And get started. I think that's the biggest challenge for a lot of people is just getting started. Even if it's one decision today, just take one little step forward, get yourself a tad better, and then do it again tomorrow. I love it. So I know we're running out of time here. I was going to ask you for just some final thoughts, but I think literally what you just said there might be the perfect way to recap that. So instead, what I want to do is just honor you for showing up here, for giving your knowledge, your time, and your expertise, because first of all, that was a plethora of information, and I can tell that you enjoy this and you have a passion for it and you have a real deep understanding of it. So for you to show up here and to give your expertise and your time, to me, it means a lot. And I know that I got a lot out of this, and I know that our listenership will as well. So just want to honor you for that.
You're welcome. And as I said earlier, just because I have this knowledge, I've just been blessed with that opportunity. The door is always open. Please reach out. You'll put in the contact, our other site is crgleader.com, where all our resources are there. There's a contact sheet if you want to reach out and, hey, Ken, I want to learn more about some of these things that you were talking about, because you were just touching on them. So the door is always open to be able to serve. I think at this time and stage in our life as we move, I'm a grandfather now, and I had no idea, when my daughter had our grandson, and now we have 2 other granddaughters, one for my son and one for my daughter. Just, when you think about the privilege of life and how important it is, and contributing and giving back, it's just so I've been blessed and been fortunate to have this opportunity. I have a lot of mentors around me who poured into my life. Well, it's my turn to give back. And so we just want to be here to be able to serve as best as we can. And my encouragement to every single person listening and watching is for you to do your best so that you can contribute your highest. And when you do that, believe me, because I've worked with hundreds of coaching clients, is when you will feel the most fulfilled, well, you'll feel the most energized, well, you'll feel like, wow, life's exciting. It's amazing. You can get caught into the negative vortex of life and all the CRAP that's going on around the world, but you can own your own space and you can influence that person right beside you. You can make it a positive event right now with you or a sucky one. Which one is it going to be? So we all have that choice. Hey, listen, I still fail, even though I teach this. But can I, for the majority of the time, make this a positive experience of working with you, leading into you? You know what? And karma's real. What you give out is what's going to come back. And look around if your life's got a bunch of crap around it, then well, I don't know. I'd look at a mirror maybe.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree 100%. I think one of the best ways to receive is to give. Like having these conversations, the joy and fulfillment that comes back from giving this time to people is immeasurable. But again, I just want to thank you for everything you've done, and I appreciate you sharing that with us.
You're welcome, Jim.
Our pleasure.